The scent of cedar and sage hung heavy in the air, mingling with something darker, something primal that made my stomach clench. On my hands and knees, I scrubbed at the ancient stone floor of the great hall, my fingers raw and red from the lye soap. Around me, dozens of servants bustled about, hanging garlands of winter berries and iron-forged ornaments that glinted in the flickering torchlight. The mating ceremony would begin at moonrise, and everything had to be perfect. "Harder, Everly," Madame Giselle hissed, her shadow falling across my work. "I want to see my reflection in those stones." I pressed the rough brush down with renewed vigor, ignoring the sting as my knuckles scraped against the floor. 22 years old, and here I was, the invisible girl, the human servant in a world of wolves, relegated to cleaning the very ground where others would celebrate their destinies. "Yes, madame," I murmured, keeping my eyes lowered as she had taught me. Never look a wolf in the eye unless invited. That was the first rule of survival for a human in the Eastern Pac territories. My pale blonde hair had fallen loose from its braid, and I tucked it behind my ear with a soapy hand. The action left a wet streak across my cheek, but I didn't care. Nobody looked at me anyway. I was furniture, less significant than the tapestries that adorned the walls, which at least told stories of great wolf warriors and their conquests. My mother's silver pendant hung beneath my threadbare dress, hidden from sight but warm against my skin. I'd been 8 when she fastened it around my neck with trembling fingers. "Keep it close," she had whispered, her eyes darting toward the door of our small cottage. "When you feel most alone, remember that water always finds its path, even through stone." Hours later, she was gone, taken by the fever that had swept through the human quarter that winter. The pendant was my talisman, my reminder that even the weakest things could persist. Wolves might be stronger, faster, and blessed with the ability to shift forms. But water, patient water, could carve through mountains given enough time. "They're coming! Clear the hall!" The steward's voice boomed through the cavernous space, and servants scattered like leaves in a storm wind. I scrambled to gather my bucket and brushes, but Madame Giselle's hand clamped down on my shoulder. "Not you," she said, her voice as cold as the winter air that seeped through the hall's high windows. "You'll stay until every inch gleams. The Alpha King and his court will arrive within the hour, and the floor must be spotless. But the ceremony is not for your eyes." Her lips curled into a sneer. "Know your place, human." The words stung more than they should have after years of similar treatment, but I nodded silently. Around me, the hall emptied as the other servants hurried away to don their formal uniforms for the evening's festivities. Only I remained, my knees aching against the hard stone, surrounded by the oppressive silence of the massive hall. I continued to scrub, moving in wider circles now that I had the space. The mating ceremony happened once every decade, when the moon reached its fullest peak in midwinter. Tonight, eligible wolves from all packs would present themselves, hoping to find their fated mates through the ancient magic that bound their kind. Those lucky enough to feel the mating pull would be joined forever in the eyes of wolf law. It was said to be beautiful, or so I'd heard from whispers in the servants' quarters. No human had ever witnessed the ceremony itself. We were mere caretakers of the space where wolf magic happened, never participants in their sacred rites. The great doors at the far end of the hall creaked open, startling me from my thoughts. I kept my head down, expecting Madame Giselle returning to criticize my work. Instead, heavy footsteps echoed across the stones. A man's gait, confident and measured. "You missed a spot." The voice was deep, accented with something ancient that raised goosebumps along my arms. I glanced up before I could stop myself, then quickly lowered my gaze when I realized my mistake. But in that brief moment, I saw polished black boots and the hem of a cloak that seemed to absorb the light around it. I'm sorry, sir," I stammered, furiously scrubbing at the spot where he pointed. "It will be clean, I promise." "What's your name?" he asked, and there was something in his tone that made it impossible not to answer. "Everly, sir." "Look at me, Everly." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a test. It had to be. Wolves often tested human servants' obedience, and those who failed were dismissed or worse. But his command had been direct. Slowly, I raised my eyes. The man before me was not a man at all. but something far more dangerous. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore authority like a second skin. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, and eyes the color of a winter sky before a storm. Not the amber or gold of most wolves, but a pale, piercing blue that seemed to look straight through me. This was no ordinary wolf. The midnight hair that fell to his shoulders and the silver circlet that rested upon his brow marked him as royalty, the Alpha King, Reese Blackthorn. I immediately dropped my gaze and bowed my head until my forehead nearly touched the wet stones. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I didn't realize—" "Rise," he said, cutting off my apology. I remained frozen, convinced I had misheard. "Sir?" I said, "Rise." His voice was softer now, but no less commanding. No one should kneel before me with such fear in their eyes. My legs trembled as I stood, still clutching my scrub brush like a shield. Water dripped from the hem of my dress, forming a small puddle around my worn boots. I felt utterly exposed under his gaze, like a rabbit before a predator. "How long have you served in this hall?" he asked, moving in a slow circle around me. I could feel his presence like a physical weight, pressing in from all sides. "All my life, Your Majesty," I answered, keeping my voice steady with effort. My mother before me as well. He made a small sound, disapproval or interest I couldn't tell. "And what do you know of tonight's ceremony?" The question felt like a trap. Humans weren't supposed to know the sacred details of wolf rituals, but we heard things, whispered rumors that traveled through the servants' quarters, like wind through grass. "Only what is common knowledge, Your Majesty," I said carefully. "That fated pairs will find each other through the ancient magic, and bonds will be formed that cannot be broken." He stopped his circling directly before me, close enough that I could smell cedar and snow on his skin. "And what do you think of this magic, little human?" The question startled me. No wolf had ever asked for my opinion, least of all on something as sacred as their mating rituals. I struggled to find an appropriate response. I think it must be beautiful," I said finally, the truth slipping out before I could catch it. "To know with certainty who you belong with." Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or amusement. "Indeed." He studied me for a moment longer. "You have honest eyes, Everly. A rare quality." Before I could respond, the doors burst open again, and a group of richly dressed wolves entered. At their head was Lord Damon, the Eastern Pack's representative to the royal court, his face contorted with shock when he saw me standing before the king. "Your Majesty," Lord Damon exclaimed, shooting me a venomous glare. "We've been searching the grounds for you. The delegation from the Southern Packs has arrived early, and—" He broke off, his nostrils flaring as he took in my presence. "What is this human doing here? The hall should be cleared for purification." The Alpha King didn't turn away from me, though he addressed Damon over his shoulder. She was completing her duties which, it appears, keep her on her knees when she should be preparing for the ceremony like everyone else. Confusion rippled through me. What could he possibly mean? Lord Damon stepped forward, his voice lowered but still audible in the cavernous space. "Your Majesty, she is merely a cleaning girl. Humans don't participate in the ceremony. It's against all tradition. Traditions change," the king replied simply. Then, to me, "Report to the royal chambers. My attendants will see that you're properly dressed for tonight." Lord Damon made a strangled sound of protest, but the Alpha King silenced him with a look. "But I don't understand," I stammered, clutching my brush tighter. "I'm not meant to be at the ceremony." The Alpha King's lips curved into something almost like a smile, though there was a dangerous edge to it that made my pulse quicken. "You're not meant to be on your knees, scrubbing floors either," he said. Then, more softly, "The water has found its path, Everly. Through stone." My mother's words. How could he possibly know? Before I could ask, he turned to his entourage. "Lord Damon will escort you to the royal wing. I expect her to be treated with the utmost respect." The last sentence carried a warning that made the other wolves stiffen. As if in a dream, I set down my brush and bucket. Lord Damon's face was a mask of barely contained rage as he gestured for me to follow him. As we reached the door, I dared to glance back. The Alpha King stood where I had left him, his pale eyes following my departure with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. For the briefest moment, I thought I saw them flash with an unnatural light. Then the heavy doors closed behind us, and I was being led through corridors I had only ever cleaned, never walked as a guest. My mind raced with questions, but instinct told me Lord Damon was not the one to ask. "The king seems to find you interesting," he said, the word dripping with disdain. Though I cannot fathom why, I remained silent, my mother's pendant suddenly warm against my skin. Ahead of us, the corridor opened into the royal wing of the keep, a place forbidden to ordinary servants like me. Guards in silver armor stood at attention, their eyes widening slightly as they saw me approach. "By order of the king," Lord Damon said tersely, and they stepped aside. As I passed through those guarded doors, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. Behind me lay the only world I had ever known, one of servitude and invisibility. Ahead lay something unknown, terrifying, and possibly magnificent. The water had found its path, and I was being swept away by its current. The royal chambers were unlike anything I had ever seen. Tapestries depicting ancient wolf battles and hunts adorned walls of polished stone. Crystal lanterns cast dancing shadows across furnishings of dark wood and crimson velvet. The air smelled of sandalwood and something wilder, a scent that seemed to whisper of forests and moonlight. Lord Damon left me in the hands of 3 female attendants, his parting glance a mixture of suspicion and disgust. The women, all wolves judging by their fluid movements and amber eyes, regarded me with undisguised curiosity. "The human from the Great Hall," one murmured, circling me as if I were an artifact of dubious origin. Her hair was the color of autumn leaves, plaited intricately down her back. "I am Sarah, personal attendant to His Majesty." "What does the king want with her?" asked another, younger and more openly hostile. She wrinkled her nose. "She reeks of lye soap and servitude." "Hush, Nira," Sarah scolded. "The king's business is his own." She turned to me, her expression softening slightly. "You are Everly, yes? The king has commanded that you be prepared for the ceremony. First, you must bathe." They led me through an adjoining door into a bathing chamber, where steam rose from a sunken pool large enough for several people. I hesitated at the edge, overwhelmed by the luxury of so much hot water. "I don't understand," I said, finding my voice at last. "Why would the Alpha King want me at the ceremony? I'm human. I'm nothing." The third attendant, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. She was older than the others, with streaks of silver in her dark hair, and a gentleness to her eyes that the others lacked. "The king sees what others do not," she said simply. "Now come, child. The water won't bite. Though I can't promise the same for some of our guests tonight." A small smile played at her lips. As they helped me undress, I clutched instinctively at my mother's pendant. Sarah noticed the movement. "You may keep your talisman," she said. "It carries old magic." I looked at her sharply. "It's just silver, a keepsake from my mother." Sarah exchanged glances with the older woman, but said nothing more. The bath was like sinking into a warm embrace. The attendants scrubbed me with scented oils that made my skin tingle, washed my hair with potions that smelled of wildflowers, and trimmed my nails until they gleamed. I had never been so clean in my life, nor so thoroughly examined. "She's actually quite pretty beneath the grime," Nira admitted grudgingly, combing through my damp hair. "Her coloring is unusual for a human." "Pale as moonlight," the older woman agreed, helping me from the bath. Like her mother before her, I froze. "You knew my mother?" The woman wrapped a soft cloth around me, avoiding my gaze. "Many faces passed through these halls over the years. Come, we must dress you." The dress they brought was unlike anything I had ever worn, the color of midnight with silver threads woven through the fabric that caught the light when I moved. It fit as if made for me, the sleeves long and flowing, the bodice snug but not constrictive. Sarah fastened a silver belt at my waist, inlaid with small blue stones that matched the Alpha King's eyes. "The king's colors," Nira observed, her tone unreadable. "Interesting." My hair they left loose, falling in pale waves down my back, adorned only with a simple circlet of silver leaves. When they finally allowed me to look in a polished metal mirror, I hardly recognized myself. The frightened servant girl was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she might belong in the world of wolves and ancient magic. But I knew better. Beneath the finery, my heart still raced with human fear, human confusion. "Why is this happening?" I asked again, as Sarah draped a cloak of deep blue velvet over my shoulders. "Please, if you know, tell me." The older attendant sighed, adjusting the clasp at my throat. "Legends say that once every few centuries, the mating ceremony reveals not just fated pairs, but destinies that will change our world. Perhaps you are part of such a destiny." "But I'm human," I protested. "I can't be part of wolf destiny." "There is more to this world than wolf and human," she replied cryptically, "and more to you than meets the eye, I suspect." A sharp knock interrupted us. Lord Damon had returned, his face a carefully composed mask as he took in my transformation. "The ceremony begins shortly," he said stiffly. "I am to escort you to the Great Hall." As we walked through corridors now filled with richly dressed wolves from all territories, I felt the weight of their stares. Whispers followed us like shadows. "A human? At the mating ceremony? What is Blackthorn thinking? Is she a gift? A servant for the feast?" Lord Damon's back remained rigidly straight, his silence speaking volumes about his feelings on the matter. When we reached the Great Hall, the same hall I had been scrubbing on my knees mere hours ago, he finally spoke. "Whatever game the king is playing, do not presume it elevates your station," he warned in a low voice. "Humans are not, and never will be, our equals." Before I could respond, the great doors swung open. The hall had been transformed. Hundreds of candles floated in iron braziers, casting a warm glow over the assembled guests. The air was thick with incense and anticipation. At the far end, upon a dais of black stone, sat a throne carved from what appeared to be a single massive piece of obsidian, and upon it sat the Alpha King. Even from a distance, his presence commanded the room. He had changed from his earlier attire into formal regalia, a tunic of midnight blue beneath a black cloak, fastened with a silver clasp at his shoulder. The silver circlet still rested upon his brow, but now I could see that it was fashioned in the shape of intertwined wolves. "Approach," Lord Damon muttered, giving me a slight push forward. All conversation ceased as I walked the length of the hall, hyper-aware of each step on the stones I had scrubbed clean. The silence was absolute, broken only by the occasional whispered comment quickly hushed. I kept my eyes fixed on the dais, drawing strength from the weight of my mother's pendant against my skin. As I drew closer, I could see that the Alpha King was not alone. Flanking his throne were several wolves of obvious rank and power. To his right stood a woman of startling beauty, her copper hair falling to her waist, her gown the color of fresh blood. Her eyes, when they fell upon me, were cold with calculation. To the king's left stood a man whose resemblance to Rhys marked him as kin, younger, with the same dark hair but amber eyes instead of blue. His expression, unlike the others, showed only mild curiosity. I stopped at the foot of the dais, unsure of the proper protocol. Should I curtsy? Kneel? My body chose for me, dropping into a deep curtsy as I had seen noble ladies do when passing through the castle. "Rise, Everly," the Alpha King commanded, just as he had in our first encounter. "And come stand beside me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The copper-haired woman's face contorted briefly before smoothing into a brittle smile. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice honeyed but sharp underneath, "the ceremony has certain traditions. The human's presence is already unprecedented. To have her stand in a place of honor is my will, Lady Valentina," the king finished for her, his tone brooking no argument. "And I believe you, of all people, understand the importance of respecting the Alpha King's will." Something passed between them, a current of tension that made the air feel suddenly charged. Lady Valentina inclined her head in acquiescence, but her eyes, when they flicked to me, promised retribution. Hesitantly, I ascended the steps of the dais. The younger man, the king's brother, I presumed, moved aside to make space for me on the king's left. As I took my place, Rhys glanced at me, his expression unreadable, but his eyes alive with that same strange light I'd glimpsed earlier. "Let the ceremony begin," he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly through the hall. An elderly wolf stepped forward from the shadows, his robes adorned with runes and feathers. The shaman, I realized, recognizing him from distant glimpses during previous festivals. He carried a stone bowl filled with something that glowed with an unearthly blue light. For 10 centuries we have gathered when the winter moon reaches its fullest. The shaman intoned, his voice surprisingly strong for one so aged. For 10 centuries the magic of our ancestors has guided wolves to their fated mates. Tonight, we honor that tradition beneath the watching eyes of the moon goddess. He placed the bowl upon a stone altar before the dais. The blue light pulsed gently, casting eerie shadows across the assembled guests. Those who seek their fates, step forward, the shaman commanded. From among the crowd, wolves began to approach the altar, men and women of various ages, all with the confident bearing of their kind. One by one, they dipped their hands into the glowing substance in the bowl. Most withdrew their hands with nothing more than a respectful nod to the shaman before returning to their places. But occasionally, something remarkable happened. A wolf would touch the substance, and it would flare brilliantly, illuminating their face with blue fire. When this occurred, another wolf somewhere in the crowd would gasp or cry out, and the two would lock eyes across the hall. The mating pull, visible in the way they moved toward one another as if drawn by invisible threads, their expressions transforming from shock to wonder to a fierce joy. Each time this happened, the assembled guests would cheer and howl their approval. The newly matched pair would kneel before the Alpha King to receive his blessing before being led away to complete their bond privately. Throughout it all, Reese remained stoic, offering each pair the same formal words of blessing. Yet I noticed his eyes often straying to me, watching my reactions to the ancient magic unfolding before us. "It really is beautiful," I whispered, forgetting myself in the wonder of the moment. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Yes," he agreed, though his eyes remained on me rather than the ceremony. "Beautiful indeed." Lady Valentina observed this exchange with narrowed eyes. "Your Majesty," she said, leaning closer to Reese, "perhaps you should participate in the ritual this year. Many worthy females have traveled great distances hoping to catch your eye." "I'm well aware of the political advantages of a mating, Valentina," he replied, his voice cool. "As you've reminded me at every council meeting for the past decade, the bloodlines must continue," she insisted. "The throne will pass to my brother if necessary." Reese cut her off, nodding toward the younger man who stood silently at my side. The brother finally spoke, his voice lighter than Reese's, but no less authoritative. "I'd rather it didn't come to that, brother. I have no interest in wearing that particular crown." "No one believes that, Orin," Lady Valentina said with a brittle laugh. "You've been plotting your path to the throne since you could walk." Orin's expression darkened, but before he could respond, a commotion near the entrance of the hall drew everyone's attention. The crowd parted to reveal Madame Giselle, her face flushed with exertion and fury. "Forgive the interruption, Your Majesty," she called, her voice echoing through the suddenly silent hall. "But I must report a serious breach of protocol. The human girl," she pointed a trembling finger at me, "has stolen valuable items from the royal stores. Silver and blue gemstones were found missing after she was taken to the royal chambers." Murmurs swept through the crowd. Lady Valentina's smile turned triumphant. "A thief," she said softly, for the king's ears alone. "How disappointing, though not surprising given her breeding." I stood frozen in shock, my hand instinctively clutching my mother's pendant, the only silver I possessed. "I took nothing," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the fear coursing through me. "I would never steal." The Alpha King raised a hand, and silence fell instantly. He rose from his throne, his height and presence seeming to fill the entire dais. "A serious accusation," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "And convenient timing." Madame Giselle faltered slightly under his gaze but held her ground. "I only speak the truth, Your Majesty. The items were discovered missing during the evening inventory. Her human scent was all over the storage room." "Interesting," Reese said, "considering she has not left my attendant's sight since I commanded her to be prepared for the ceremony. Perhaps she had accomplices," Lady Valentina suggested smoothly. "Humans are known to be resourceful when it comes to taking what isn't theirs." The tension in the hall was palpable. I could feel the hostility emanating from many of the wolves. their instinctive distrust of humans combining with the shocking spectacle of seeing one standing beside their king. This accusation was all they needed to confirm their worst suspicions. The shaman stepped forward, his ancient eyes fixing on me with unsettling intensity. "There is a simple way to determine the truth," he said, gesturing to the glowing bowl. "The moon goddess's light reveals all deception. Let the human place her hand in the sacred waters." Gasps and murmurs erupted once more. The sacred waters were meant only for wolves seeking mates. For a human to touch them was unprecedented. The waters could harm a human, Orin cautioned, surprising me with what almost sounded like concern. "Or they could reveal her true nature," Lady Valentina countered. "Either way, justice is served." I looked to the Alpha King, whose face had become an unreadable mask. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I felt something pass between us. A question, perhaps, or a challenge. "I'll do it," I said, before he could speak. "I have nothing to hide." The great hall fell silent as I stepped down from the dais, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. The path to the stone altar felt impossibly long, every step carrying me closer to something that could either vindicate or destroy me. I was acutely aware of hundreds of eyes tracking my movement, of the soft whisper of my borrowed finery against the stones I had scrubbed clean only hours before. Behind me, I could feel the Alpha King's presence like a physical weight. Watchful, intense. What game was he playing? Why had he singled me out, only to let me face this test alone? The shaman's wrinkled face revealed nothing as I approached. Up close, I could see that the waters in the stone bowl weren't liquid at all, but rather a swirling mist that glowed with an ethereal blue light. It moved with purpose, as if alive and aware. "The sacred waters reveal truth," the shaman intoned. "If you have stolen, if you have lied, the goddess will know." His voice dropped lower, so that only I could hear his next words. "And if you are more than what you seem, child, that too will be revealed." A chill ran down my spine. What did he mean? I was nothing. Just a servant girl with a dead mother and a silver pendant. Wasn't I? "I am innocent," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I have taken nothing that wasn't mine." With a deep breath, I plunged my hand into the mist. Cold seared through me, a freezing burn that traveled up my arm and spread through my chest like frost across a window pane. I gasped, unable to withdraw my hand as the mist curled around my wrists like living tendrils, holding me fast. The blue glow intensified, swirling faster around my imprisoned arm. Voices whispered at the edge of my consciousness. Ancient voices speaking in a language I shouldn't understand, but somehow did. They spoke of blood and moon and destiny, of secrets buried and truths forgotten. Images flashed behind my eyes. A woman with hair like mine, running through a moonlit forest, wolves at her heels. The same woman kneeling before a younger version of the shaman, her face streaked with tears as she held a baby, me, in her arms. "Hide her," she begged. "Hide what she is until she's ready." My mother. The memory slammed into me with physical force. Not taken by fever as I'd been told, but something else. Something hidden. The mist suddenly shot upward, enveloping me in a column of blue light that reached toward the high ceiling of the great hall. Wolves cried out in alarm, backing away. Through the swirling light, I saw the Alpha King rise from his throne, his expression fierce with an emotion I couldn't name. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light collapsed back into the stone bowl, releasing my arm. I staggered backward, breathing hard, my skin tingling with the residual magic. The shaman stared at me, his ancient eyes wide with wonder and something else, recognition. "The waters do not lie," he declared, his voice ringing through the hall. "This girl has stolen nothing." Relief washed through me, weakening my knees. But the shaman wasn't finished. "But they have revealed something else." He turned to address the Alpha King directly. "The waters have awakened what was hidden. What was bound is coming unbound." Confusion rippled through the crowd. Lady Valentina stepped forward, her lovely face contorted with fury. "What nonsense is this? She's a human, nothing more." "Am I?" The words slipped out before I could stop them, born of the strange certainty growing inside me. The images I'd seen, the voices I'd heard, they had unlocked something, a truth I hadn't known was there to find. The Alpha King descended from the dais in one fluid movement, crossing to stand beside me. Up close, I could see flecks of silver in his blue eyes. Like stars in a night sky, I knew, he said quietly, for my ears alone. From the moment I saw you kneeling on those stones, I sensed what others had missed. Then, louder, addressing the assembly, the ceremony will continue. Lady Valentina, you will investigate who truly took the missing items. I suspect we'll find they never left the royal stores at all. Madame Giselle had gone pale, backing away toward the exit. At a signal from Rhys, 2 guards moved to block her escape. Your Majesty, Lord Damon stepped forward, his face a mask of concern. Whatever the waters may have shown, we cannot simply ignore centuries of tradition. A human has no place in these sacred rites. She is not just human, the shaman countered. Before Rhys could respond, the waters do not react to human touch. They seek the old blood, the blood of wolves. Gasps and exclamations erupted around the hall. My head spun with implications I couldn't yet fully grasp. Not just human? What was I then? Impossible, Lady Valentina hissed. Look at her. She has no wolf scent, no pack markings. She's been among us for years, and no one has ever suspected. Because it was hidden, the shaman cut her off. Bound by old magic I myself helped craft, though I had forgotten until this moment. He turned to me, his gaze apologetic. Your mother came to me, child. She begged for protection, for a way to hide what you were until you were old enough to bear it. My fingers found my pendant, clutching it like a lifeline. My mother was human, I said, though the certainty I'd carried all my life was beginning to fracture. Your mother was wolf, Rhys said gently. A rare silver wolf from the Northern Territories, thought to be extinct. She fled here seeking sanctuary when the Northern Alpha turned tyrant. The Northern wolves were slaughtered 20 years ago, Orin added, having joined us at the altar. We thought none survived. One did, Rhys said. And she bore a child before she was discovered and killed. A child she entrusted to human caretakers with a spell of concealment to mask her true nature. The pendant burned against my skin, and suddenly I understood. This isn't just silver, I whispered. It's the binding spell, the shaman nodded. And now it weakens, as it was meant to when you came of age. The waters have accelerated what was already beginning. A strange sensation swept through me, a tingling awareness of my body that I'd never experienced before. My senses seemed to sharpen. Suddenly I could distinguish individual scents in the room, hear whispered conversations from across the hall. My skin felt too tight, as though something beneath it was struggling to emerge. What's happening to me? I gasped, clutching at Rhys's arm without thinking. His hand covered mine, steadying. Your wolf is waking, he said simply, for the first time. Terror and exhilaration warred within me. A wolf? Me? It seemed impossible. Yet something deep inside recognized the truth of his words. A part of me I'd never known existed was stirring to life, reaching toward the surface like a plant seeking sunlight. This changes nothing, Lady Valentina declared, her voice cutting through my internal turmoil. Half-breed or not, she was raised human, knows nothing of our ways. She cannot simply step into our world and expect to be accepted, especially not at the king's side. Yet here she stands, Rhys countered, his voice dangerously soft. And here she will remain. The finality in his tone silenced even Valentina, though her eyes promised this wasn't over. The shaman cleared his throat, drawing attention back to the ceremony. The mating rites must continue. The moon reaches its apex soon. Rhys nodded, but kept his hand over mine, his thumb brushing lightly across my knuckles in a gesture that felt oddly intimate. Continue, he commanded. As more wolves approached the altar to seek their fates, Rhys guided me back to the dais. I felt disconnected from my body, my mind reeling with revelations. Each step seemed to awaken new sensations, scents sharpening, sounds clarifying, as though layers of muffling fabric were being stripped away from my senses. You knew, I said, as we reached the dais steps. You knew what I was. That's why you called me to rise. I suspected, he corrected. Something in your scent, beneath the human layers, a hint of what was hidden. And then there was your defiance, subtle but unmistakable. No ordinary human looks a wolf king in the eye the way you did. I was terrified, I admitted. His lips quirked. Yes, but you looked anyway. We took our places once more, though everything felt different now. The wolves who approached the altar to test their fate now glanced at me with newfound speculation rather than disdain. Word had spread quickly through the assembly. The human servant was not human after all, but something rarer, something potentially valuable. I wasn't naive enough to mistake their sudden interest for acceptance. I was still an outsider, perhaps even more dangerous now as an unknown quantity, but I was no longer invisible. As the ceremony progressed, Oren leaned closer to me. My brother has suspected for months that survivors from the northern territories might exist, he murmured. He's been searching for signs. I never imagined he'd find one scrubbing the floors of our own keep. Neither did I said dryly, surprising myself with the response. Something was changing within me, not just physically, but emotionally. The timidity that had been my armor for so long was falling away, revealing something fiercer underneath. Oren grinned, a flash of genuine warmth. I think I might like you, little wolf. Enough, Oren, Rhys said, though without heat. She needs time to adjust before being subjected to your particular brand of charm. Lady Valentina, who had been conferring with Lord Damon, returned to her position at Rhys's right. Her expression was composed, but the tension in her body betrayed her inner turmoil. The missing items have been located, she reported stiffly. They were misplaced during inventory. Madame Giselle has been removed for questioning. How convenient, Rhys remarked, almost as if someone wished to discredit our guest. Valentina's smile was brittle, a misunderstanding, nothing more. See that there are no more misunderstandings tonight, Rhys said, his tone making the warning clear. As the ceremony continued, I became increasingly aware of a strange pressure building within me, an energy that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. My skin felt feverish, my muscles twitching with unfamiliar impulses. The pendant against my chest now felt like ice, as though fighting against something hot beneath my skin. Something's wrong, I whispered, clutching at the arms of my chair. I feel strange. Rhys's attention snapped to me, his eyes narrowing as he studied my face. The binding spell is breaking down too quickly, he said, concern evident in his voice. The waters accelerated the process. The shaman, who had been preparing another ritual component, looked up sharply. She should not shift for the first time here, he warned. The shock could be dangerous, especially with the spell still partially intact. Shift? I echoed, a new fear gripping me. You mean, your wolf form is trying to emerge, Rhys explained, rising from his throne. But the spell is fighting it, creating a conflict that could harm you. Without warning, a spasm of pain shot through me, doubling me over. I bit back a cry, aware of the many eyes upon us. Whispers rippled through the crowd as wolves scented my distress. The northern wolves always had unpredictable magic, Lord Damon observed, his tone clinical rather than concerned. Perhaps she is simply too weak to survive the transition. Many half-breeds don't. She is not weak, Rhys growled, the sound so primal it silenced everyone nearby. He knelt beside my chair, one hand moving to the back of my neck in a gesture that somehow both commanded and comforted. Listen to me, Everly. You need to focus. Find the wolf inside you and reach for her. Don't fight against her. Another wave of pain crashed through me. I don't know how, I gasped. The pendant, the shaman said urgently. It must be removed. The binding must be broken completely. I clutched at the silver chain, but my fingers had begun to tremble too violently to work the clasp. Without hesitation, Rhys reached out and snapped the chain with one quick movement, lifting the pendant away from my skin. Relief was immediate but incomplete. The pain receded, but the pressure remained, a wild energy seeking release. I could feel it now, the other consciousness within me, awakening after years of enforced slumber. She was disoriented, angry, afraid, and very, very strong. I can feel her, I whispered, meeting Rhys's intense gaze. My wolf. She wants out. Then let her come, he said softly. Don't be afraid, Everly. This is who you were always meant to be. Lady Valentina stepped forward. Your Majesty, perhaps this should be handled privately. If she loses control, she won't, Rhys said with a certainty I didn't share. The pressure within me spiked suddenly, and I knew I was out of time. I can't hold it, I warned, my voice strained. Please, help me. In one fluid motion, Rhys lifted me into his arms and strode toward a side door, calling over his shoulder. Orin, continue the ceremony. Shaman, with me. As we left the great hall, I heard the buzz of shocked conversation rise behind us, but couldn't focus on anything beyond the battle raging within my body. Rhys carried me swiftly through torchlit corridors, until we reached what appeared to be private chambers. His own, I realized dimly. Recognizing the same scent of cedar and snow that clung to him, he set me gently on a fur-covered bed, then stepped back, giving me space. The shaman hobbled in behind us, closing the door firmly. The first shift is always difficult, the old wolf said, his voice gentler than I'd heard it before. But fighting it will only make it worse. You must surrender to the change. I don't know how, I repeated, frustration edging my voice, as another wave of pressure built within me. Your body knows, Rhys said. Trust it, Everly. Trust yourself. The pressure crested, and this time I didn't resist. Something seemed to crack open inside me. Not painfully, but like the breaking of chains long worn. Power flooded through me, reshaping muscle and bone with breathtaking speed. I was dimly aware of my borrowed finery tearing as my body contorted and changed. The world shifted perspective, colors bleeding away to be replaced by sharper contrasts, scents becoming so vivid they painted pictures in my mind. And then it was done. The transformation complete. I stood on 4 paws, my body covered in fur so pale it was almost silver. I could see my reflection in a mirror across the room, a wolf smaller than most, lean and fine-boned, with eyes that remained my own human blue. Remarkable, the shaman breathed. A true silver wolf. We thought the bloodline extinct. Rhys approached slowly, his movements careful but unafraid. He knelt before me, extending his hand for me to scent. Welcome back to the world, little wolf, he said softly. You've been missed. I bumped my muzzle against his hand, a gesture that felt instinctively right. A low whine escaped my throat. Confusion, wonder, and lingering fear all tangled together. The shift back will be easier, he promised, seeming to understand my unspoken question. But take your time. Feel your wolf. Let her remember what it is to be free. I took an experimental step, then another, marveling at the fluid grace of this new body, at the symphony of scents and sounds now available to me. The wolf consciousness that had awakened inside me was no longer separate, but merged with my human thoughts. Wilder, more instinctive, but fundamentally still me. She'll need guidance, the shaman said to Rhys. The northern wolves had their own ways, their own magic. Much has been lost. She'll have whatever she needs, Rhys replied, his eyes never leaving me as I cautiously explored the room, growing more confident with each step. Whatever it takes. A sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Orin's voice called through. Brother, you're needed. There's been an incident. Rhys hesitated, clearly torn. Go, the shaman said. I will remain with her until she shifts back. With a last long look at me, Rhys nodded. I'll return as soon as I can, he promised. To me, not the shaman. Then he was gone, the door closing firmly behind him. Alone with the ancient wolf, I padded back to where my ruined dress lay in a pool of midnight fabric. The silver belt remained intact, those blue stones catching the light just as Rhys's eyes did. You have questions, the shaman said, lowering himself to sit cross-legged on the floor near me. Many, I imagine. When you shift back, I will answer what I can. For now, know this. Nothing that has happened tonight was accident or coincidence. The Alpha King has been searching for you, though he didn't know exactly what he sought until he found you. My ears pricked forward, my head tilting in silent question. Yes, little wolf, the shaman confirmed with a small smile. There is much more to this story than a servant girl discovered to be something more. Much more indeed. Shifting back to human form came more easily than I expected, as if my body remembered an ancient rhythm it had never consciously known. One moment I stood on 4 paws, silver fur gleaming in the firelight. The next I was kneeling on the thick rugs of the Alpha King's chambers, human skin prickling with the sudden absence of fur. The shaman draped a heavy robe around my shoulders, averting his eyes with unexpected modesty. "The king's," he explained as I pulled the garment close. It smelled of cedar and something wild, of reese, and the fabric enveloped me in warmth that went beyond the physical. "My mother," I said, my voice rough from the shift. "Tell me about her. Everything." The old wolf settled into a nearby chair with a sigh that spoke of ancient bones and older sorrows. "Her name was Lyra Moonshade, last daughter of the Northern Alpha bloodline. She was barely more than a girl when the massacre happened, younger than you are now." "Massacre?" The word fell like a stone between us. 20 years ago, the Northern Pack was ruled by Alpha Thorsten, a wolf of exceptional cruelty. He forbade his pack from mingling with humans, though the other territories had long since established peaceful coexistence. When he discovered some of his wolves had been meeting in secret with humans from nearby villages, he executed them all. Wolves and humans alike. I shuddered, drawing the robe tighter around me. And my mother? Lyra was Thorsten's niece, next in line for leadership after his son. She opposed his brutality and helped many escape before the worst came. When Thorsten discovered her betrayal, he ordered the slaughter of anyone who might have supported her claim to leadership. Hundreds died. The shaman's eyes clouded with remembered grief. A handful escaped, including your mother, already carrying you within her. She came here, to the Eastern Territories. She sought asylum with the previous Alpha King, Reese's father. He granted it, but there were complications. Political pressure from other packs who feared Thorsten's wrath. Your mother was hidden among the human servants, her wolf nature bound by the spell in that silver pendant. She hoped to keep you safe until you were old enough to control your abilities. I touched my throat, where the pendant had rested for so long. But she died when I was 8. The fever was a convenient story, the shaman said gently. In truth, assassins from the north found her. She fought to protect you, but was mortally wounded. With her last strength, she strengthened the binding spell on you, hiding your true nature so completely that even I forgot what I had helped create. Tears burned behind my eyes, but something fiercer than grief rose within me. A cold anger that felt more wolf than human. And my father? A northern wolf who died in the initial purge, I believe. Your mother never spoke his name. I absorbed this in silence, pieces of my identity shifting and reforming like a kaleidoscope. All my life I had been nothing. A servant, invisible, insignificant. Now I carried the blood of a noble wolf line, the last survivor of a slaughtered pack. The Alpha King, I said finally. How long has he known? The shaman's weathered face creased in a smile. Suspected, not known. Reese has been searching for northern survivors since he took the throne 5 years ago. He believed that integrating the remaining northern bloodlines, if any existed, would strengthen the eastern pack and heal old wounds. A political motive, then, I said, trying to ignore the twinge of disappointment the realization brought. Initially, perhaps, the shaman's eyes held a knowing gleam. But his interest in you appears to have evolved beyond politics. Before I could question him further, the chamber door swung open. Reese entered, his expression dark with contained fury. Behind him came Oren, whose usual easy manner had been replaced by watchful tension. The ceremony continues, Reese announced, his eyes finding mine immediately, but there have been developments. He crossed to a cabinet and withdrew a bundle of fabric, which he handed to me. Fresh clothes. Sarah selected them for you. Thank you, I said, clutching the bundle. What's happened? Reese and Oren exchanged a glance loaded with unspoken communication. Word of your true nature has spread beyond the keep, Oren explained. A messenger was caught attempting to leave for the northern territories. Cold dread slithered down my spine. The northern pack still exists. What remains of it, Reese confirmed. After the massacre, The survivors regrouped under a new alpha, Thorsten's son, Garrick. He's continued his father's isolationist policies, though with less outright brutality. Until now, Oren added grimly, our spies report he's been building alliances, gathering strength. If he learns a legitimate heir to the northern leadership still lives, he'd see me as a threat, I finished, understanding dawning. Even though I know nothing of northern ways. Especially because of that, Rhys said. You represent both a claim to his power and a bridge to the human world he despises. Your very existence challenges everything he stands for. I stood, still clutching the robe around me. I should return to the servants' quarters. If I'm just a maid again, perhaps... No. Rhys's voice was quiet but held an authority that silenced the room. That life is over, Everly. You cannot return to it any more than a butterfly can return to its cocoon. His eyes softened slightly, nor would I allow it. The possessive edge in his voice sent a different kind of shiver through me. Not fear, but something equally potent. Change, Rhys continued, turning away to give me privacy. Then we will return to the ceremony together. The Eastern Pack must see that you stand under my protection. Oren and the shaman followed his lead, turning their backs as I slipped behind a carved wooden screen to change. The clothes Sarah had chosen were simpler than the ceremonial gown, but still finer than anything I'd worn before. Soft leather trousers, a silk tunic in pale blue, and a sleeveless overtunic of darker blue leather that laced up the sides. Boots of supple black leather completed the outfit, practical yet elegant, suitable for a wolf. When I emerged, Rhys's eyes tracked over me with undisguised appreciation. Better? It feels... right, I admitted, surprised at how comfortable I felt in this new skin, both the clothes and the knowledge of what lay beneath them. Your wolf agrees, he observed with a slight smile. I can see her in your eyes now, no longer hidden. I touched my face self-consciously. Is it obvious? Will everyone be able to tell? Only to those who know what to look for, he assured me. The rest will see only what you choose to show them. As we prepared to leave, Rhys paused by the door. There's something else you should know. Lady Valentina has formally petitioned to be considered as my mate. Something hot and possessive flared in my chest. My wolf, bristling at the mention of the copper-haired woman. I see, I said carefully. A political match? So she claims. The union would bring her father's considerable territories under Eastern control. His eyes held mine, searching. Does this trouble you? Did it? I barely knew this man, this king. Yet something within me, wolf and woman both, recoiled at the thought of him with another. It's not my place to have an opinion on such matters, I hedged. Isn't it? His voice lowered, intimate in the small space between us. My wolf seems to believe otherwise. Before I could respond, Oren cleared his throat pointedly. The ceremony, brother? The one with hundreds of guests waiting for their king's return? Rhys's lips quirked in annoyance, but he stepped back, offering me his arm with formal courtesy. Shall we? As we made our way back toward the great hall, I became increasingly aware of a subtle change in how the palace guards and servants responded to our passing. No longer did they look through me as if I were invisible. Now their eyes tracked my movement with cautious curiosity, and they bowed not just to Rhys, but to me as well. Shallow, uncertain bows that acknowledged something had fundamentally changed, even if they didn't yet understand what. They can sense your wolf, Rhys murmured, noticing my confusion. Even bound as she was for so long, she carries an aura of power. I don't feel powerful, I confessed. I feel... lost. This morning I knew exactly who I was and where I belonged. Now you are becoming who you were always meant to be, he finished. The uncertainty will pass, Everly, I promise you that. At the entrance to the great hall, we paused. Within, I could hear the continued sounds of the ceremony, music, conversation, occasional cheers as another mated pair was formed. My new senses detected the rich tapestry of scents, food, wine, perfumes, and beneath it all, the distinctive musk of wolves in their human forms. Ready? Rhys asked, his hand covering mine where it rested on his arm. I took a deep breath and nodded. As the doors swung open, conversation faltered. then resumed at a more subdued pitch. All eyes turned toward us as we entered. I held myself straight, channeling the newfound confidence of my wolf even as my human heart raced with anxiety. Lady Valentina intercepted us before we could reach the dais, her crimson gown swirling around her like spilled blood. "Your Majesty," she greeted Rhys with a deep curtsy that displayed the perfect curve of her white throat. We were growing concerned. Her eyes flicked to me, taking in my changed appearance. "I see our little revelation has undergone a transformation, Lady Valentina," I acknowledged, surprised at the cool composure in my own voice. My wolf didn't like this woman, didn't trust her honey-sweet tone, or the calculating gleam in her amber eyes. "You've adjusted remarkably quickly," she observed. "Most who experience their first shift require days to recover." "Everly is stronger than she appears," Rhys replied before I could. "A quality often overlooked in her, I suspect." Valentina's smile tightened fractionally. "Indeed. The Council is most eager to discuss these developments. A survivor of the Northern bloodline raises certain diplomatic concerns. The Council can wait," Rhys said dismissively. "Tonight is for celebration, not politics." He guided me past her, but not before I caught the flash of genuine anger that crossed her perfect features. Clearly, Lady Valentina was unaccustomed to being dismissed. As we took our places once more on the dais, the shaman approached with my mother's silver pendant resting on a small cushion of midnight velvet. "This belongs to you," he said, offering it to me. "Though it no longer binds your wolf, it carries your mother's protective magic. It may serve you still in ways yet to be discovered." I accepted it with reverence, feeling the weight of history, my history, in the small silver oval. "Thank you." The ceremony continued, but I was acutely aware that I had become as much a spectacle as the ritual itself. Whispers followed me, glances both curious and hostile. I caught fragments of conversations with my newly enhanced hearing. Last of the Northern bloodline. Raised as a servant. Can you imagine? The king seems quite taken with her. Valentina will never allow it. This last came from a cluster of nobles near Lady Valentina, who held court at the edge of the hall. Her laughter rang out, deliberately loud enough to carry to the dais, though I couldn't make out what had amused her so. "Ignore her," Orin advised, noticing my attention drift in that direction. "Valentina has expected to be queen since we were children. Your emergence has complicated her plans. I have no interest in being queen," I said firmly. "I barely understand what it means to be a wolf." Orin's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Try telling that to my brother. He hasn't taken his eyes off you since you entered the hall." I glanced at Rhys, who was indeed watching me with an intensity that sent heat blooming across my skin. When our eyes met, he didn't look away, but held my gaze with deliberate purpose. The shaman approached the altar once more, raising his hands for silence. "The moon reaches its zenith," he announced. "The time has come for the Alpha King to seek his fate." A hush fell over the assembly. This, it seemed, was the moment many had been waiting for. Rhys rose from his throne with fluid grace. "As tradition demands," he acknowledged, descending to the altar. Lady Valentina moved closer to the front of the crowd, her face a mask of serene confidence. Around her, a group of elegantly dressed female wolves, the eligible candidates for the king's mate, I realized, arranged themselves with similar expressions of hopeful anticipation. The shaman held out the stone bowl. "May the goddess guide your heart to its true match," he intoned. Rhys dipped his hand into the swirling mist without hesitation. For a moment, nothing happened, and a murmur of disappointment rippled through the watching crowd. Then, suddenly, the blue light flared with blinding intensity, brighter than any reaction I had witnessed throughout the evening. The light shot upward, then arced across the hall like a comet, leaving a trail of shimmering particles in its wake. Directly toward me, the light engulfed me in a cold fire that didn't burn. Every nerve in my body sang with recognition, with rightness. Across the space between us, Rhys's eyes locked with mine, blazing with that same unnatural light I'd glimpsed earlier, the light of his wolf, reaching for mine. The mating pull. Impossible. Unthinkable. And yet undeniable. Shock rippled through the assembly, followed by gasps and exclamations of disbelief. Lady Valentina's face contorted in fury before she smoothed her features into a brittle mask of dignity. "Unprecedented," the shaman declared, his voice carrying above the growing commotion. "But the waters do not lie. The goddess has spoken." Rhys stood motionless at the altar, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. Then, with deliberate steps, he crossed the space between us and extended his hand. "Everly," he said, my name a question and a command all at once. I hesitated, overwhelmed by the implications. This morning I had been a servant, invisible and alone. Now I stood revealed as a wolf of noble blood, the last of a slaughtered line, and apparently the fated mate of the most powerful alpha in the territories. "This isn't possible," I whispered. "I don't know how to be what you need." "What I need," he replied, his voice low and fierce, "is exactly what you are." From the edge of the dais, Lord Damon stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the council must convene immediately. This situation requires careful consideration. The diplomatic implications alone can wait." Rhys finished for him, his eyes never leaving mine. "The goddess has made her choice clear." "A choice that conveniently serves your political agenda," Valentina called out, her composure finally cracking. "How fortunate that the last northern heir is revealed as your fated mate on the very night you've been searching for a way to legitimize bringing northern wolves back into the fold." Murmurs of agreement rose from various quarters of the hall. Doubt crept into my mind. Was this what Rhys had intended all along? A political maneuver disguised as destiny? "The waters cannot be manipulated," the shaman countered sternly. "Not even by an alpha king." "Perhaps not," Valentina persisted, "but a servant girl with newly awakened powers might easily be manipulated into believing whatever she's told." My wolf bristled at the insinuation, a low growl building in my throat before I could stop it. The sound, so inhuman, silenced the hall instantly. "I may be new to this world," I said, my voice carrying with surprising strength, "but I am not a fool, Lady Valentina, nor am I a pawn to be moved across a political board." I turned to Rhys, searching his face for truth. "If this is merely politics—" "It is not," he cut me off, his voice rough with emotion I hadn't expected. "I sought northern survivors to heal old wounds, yes, but this—" He gestured to the fading blue light that still shimmered between us. "This I neither planned nor anticipated." The sincerity in his eyes was impossible to doubt. Whatever game had been playing out in the great hall tonight, this development had surprised him as much as it had me. Slowly, I placed my hand in his. The contact sent a jolt of awareness through me, as if completing a circuit. My wolf surged forward in recognition, yearning for closer contact. From the flare of heat in Rhys's eyes, his wolf responded similarly. "The mating pull is genuine," the shaman confirmed for all to hear. "As decreed by ancient law, none may challenge the goddess's choice." Valentina's face had gone pale with fury, but she mastered herself with visible effort. "Then, as a loyal subject, I offer my congratulations," she said, the words like shards of glass. With a deep curtsy that somehow managed to convey contempt rather than respect, she withdrew from the hall, her entourage trailing behind her. "She will be trouble," Oren murmured, coming to stand beside us. "She has always been trouble," Rhys replied dryly, "but now is not the time to worry about Valentina's wounded pride." He raised our joined hands, and a cheer went up from many in the crowd. Those loyal to the Alpha King accepting his fate, whatever their private reservations might be. Others remained silent, their expressions ranging from shock to calculation to outright hostility. I had entered this hall as nothing, and now stood on the precipice of becoming everything. Mate to the Alpha King, last heir of the northern bloodline, a symbol of unity or division, depending on where one stood. The enormity of it threatened to overwhelm me. As if sensing my turmoil, Rhys squeezed my hand gently. "One step at a time," he murmured for my ears alone. "Tonight, we celebrate. Tomorrow, we face whatever comes." But even as he spoke, I noticed movement at the edges of the hall. Guards tensing, hands moving to weapons. A messenger slipped in through a side door, making directly for Oren with urgent purpose. My newly enhanced senses detected a shift in the atmosphere, the subtle scent of fear and anticipation threading through the celebratory air. Something was happening beyond the walls of the keep, something that cast a shadow over the night's revelations. The water had found its path through stone, just as my mother had promised. But the path ahead, I suspected, would be far from smooth. Oren's face darkened as he listened to the messenger's whispered report. With a sharp nod, he dismissed the man and turned to us, his usual easy manner replaced by the bearing of a warrior. "Northern wolves at our borders," he said quietly, pitching his voice for our ears alone. "A delegation led by Alpha Garrick himself, demanding entry." Reese's hand tightened on mine. "How many?" 20, with more camped beyond the ridge. Their stated purpose is to attend the mating ceremony, though they arrive suspiciously late and conveniently after word of Everly has had time to reach them," Reese concluded, his jaw tight. They must have been nearby already watching. Fear coiled in my stomach, but I forced it down. "What will you do?" "What protocol demands," Reese said grimly. "I'll grant them entry and hospitality. To do otherwise would risk open conflict." Lord Damon approached, his face grave. "Your Majesty, the Council strongly advises against admitting northern wolves into the keep. Given tonight's developments, the timing cannot be coincidence." "I agree," Reese said, "but denying them would only confirm their suspicions and give Garrick the provocation he seeks." His eyes met mine. "Besides, it's time we brought this conflict into the light. No more shadows, no more hiding." Something in his words resonated with my wolf. For too long I had lived in shadow, invisible, silent, head bowed. Whatever danger approached with the northern wolves, facing it openly felt right in a way I couldn't articulate. "I'll stand with you," I said, surprising myself with my conviction. Reese studied my face, then nodded once. "Then let us greet our guests," he said, raising his voice to address the assembly. "The northern pack approaches. They will be received with the courtesy due to all wolves on this sacred night." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, concern, excitement, speculation. The mating ceremony continued around us, but the atmosphere had shifted from celebration to wary anticipation. "Stay close to me," Reese murmured as we moved toward the main entrance. Oren flanked my other side, while Lord Damon and the shaman followed close behind. The great doors swung open, revealing a procession of wolves unlike any I had ever seen. Where eastern wolves favored rich fabrics and elegant styling, these newcomers wore rugged leathers adorned with bones and iron. Their hair was worn long and wild, braided with feathers and beads. They moved with a feral grace that made even the most dominant eastern wolves seem tame by comparison. At their head walked a man who could only be Alpha Garrick. Tall and broad-shouldered like Reese, but where the Eastern King carried his power with restrained elegance, Garrick wore his like a weapon. His hair was the red gold of autumn leaves, his beard intricately braided. Scars marked his face and bare arms, telling stories of battles fought and won. His amber eyes swept the hall, taking in the opulence with undisguised contempt, before landing on our small group. When his gaze found me, it sharpened with predatory focus. "Alpha Garrick," Reese greeted him formally. "The Eastern Pack welcomes you to the mating ceremony, though you arrive as the moon begins its descent." Garrick's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The invitation seemed overdue, Alpha Blackthorn, but better late than never. Wouldn't you agree?" The words carried an edge that everyone felt. This was no friendly visit. "All packs are welcome during the sacred truce of the mating moon," Reese replied smoothly. "Though customarily, one's intention to attend is announced in advance." Garrick shrugged, the gesture deliberately casual. "Northern wolves follow older traditions. We come and go as the goddess wills." His gaze returned to me. "And it seems the goddess has been generous with her revelations tonight." The way he said it made my skin crawl. How much did he know? How quickly had word traveled? "You've had a long journey," Reese said, changing tack. "Refreshment and rest will be provided for your pack." "Most hospitable," Garrick replied with mocking gratitude. "But first, won't you introduce us to your companion? She wears northern colors, yet I don't believe we've had the pleasure." The hall had gone deathly quiet, hundreds of wolves watching the tense exchange. I felt the weight of destiny settling on my shoulders, heavier than any burden I'd carried as a servant. Reese placed his hand at the small of my back, a gesture both protective and claiming. This is Everly Moonshade, daughter of Lyra Moonshade of the Northern Territories, and my fated mate. Gasps and murmurs swept through Garrick's entourage. One woman with intricate tattoos covering her arms stepped forward, sniffing the air as if to confirm my scent, before whispering urgently in Garrick's ear. Moonshade, Garrick repeated, his voice dangerously soft. A name I haven't heard spoken in many years. The bloodline was thought extinct. Clearly not, Reese said. Clearly, Garrick's eyes narrowed as he studied me more intently, though I see little of the North in her bearing. She smells of soap and servitude. He took a step closer, his nostrils flaring. And yet, beneath that, yes, there it is. Lyra's scent. Faint, but unmistakable. I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze directly, a challenge my former self would never have attempted. My mother died protecting me from northern assassins, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I was raised among humans, unaware of my heritage until tonight. How convenient, Garrick said silkily, unaware of your claim to northern leadership, yet found and mated by the Eastern Alpha on the very night your wolf awakens. One might almost suspect manipulation. The mating pull cannot be forced or faked, Reese countered, his voice hardening, as well you know. Perhaps not, Garrick conceded. But a naive girl, newly come into her power, might easily be led to believe whatever she's told. Lady Valentina's words, almost exactly. I wondered briefly if they had somehow coordinated their attacks, but the genuine hostility between the two alphas made that unlikely. I know my own mind, I said, drawing on my wolf's strength, and my own heart. Garrick laughed, the sound rich but cold. Do you? When just this morning you were, what, a servant, a cleaner of floors, and tonight you stand as potential queen of the Eastern Territories and heir to Northern leadership. That's quite a leap for one day's education. His words struck uncomfortably close to my own doubts, but I refused to show weakness. I don't claim leadership of anything, least of all a pack that murdered my mother. A low growl rumbled through the northern wolves at my words. Garrick's expression darkened. Careful, little wolf. You speak of matters you don't understand. Then enlighten her, Reese suggested coolly. As her bloodkin, you owe her the truth of her heritage, do you not? It was a clever move. By appealing to northern traditions of blood loyalty, Reese had placed Garrick in an awkward position. After a tense moment, Garrick inclined his head. Indeed. Perhaps we should discuss family matters. Privately. Anything you wish to say to Everly can be said in my presence, Reese replied. As her mate, her concerns are mine. Garrick's smile was all teeth. The mating isn't complete until the bond is sealed. Until then, she remains unbounded. He looked around at the watching crowd. Unless you've already taken that liberty. Heat flooded my face at the crude implication. Mating among wolves involved not just the spiritual connection revealed by the sacred waters, but a physical claiming as well, one that typically occurred in private following the ceremony. The ritual will be observed with all proper respect, Reese said, his voice glacial. Something you might consider before making further insinuations about my mate. The word mate, claimed so definitively, sent a shiver down my spine. My wolf responded to it with fierce approval, even as my human side remained wary of moving too quickly into a role I barely understood. Garrick held up his hands in mock surrender. No offense intended. We northern wolves are simply more direct about natural matters. He turned his attention back to me. But where are my manners? I should welcome you properly to your ancestral pack. Before anyone could react, he closed the distance between us and clasped my shoulders in a grip just short of painful. Leaning close, he inhaled deeply, scenting me in the wolf way. It was an intimate gesture, appropriate only between close pack members, and I had to fight my instinct to recoil. Blood calls to blood, he murmured, his amber eyes boring into mine. Can you feel it, little cousin, the pull of the north? It's in your veins, no matter how they've tried to dilute it. Reese growled, low and dangerous. Step back, Garrick. The northern alpha ignored him, still holding me in that too tight grip. You could be more than a consort to an Eastern king, Everly Moonshade. You could rule in your own right, among your mother's people. Your birthright awaits in the northern mountains. I met his gaze steadily. My mother fled those mountains in fear for her life. Why would I return to the pack that hunted her? Misinformation, Garrick said smoothly. Lyra was beloved among our people. It was outside forces that drove her away. Forces that perhaps had their own designs on northern bloodlines even then. His eyes flicked meaningfully to Rhys. The accusation was clear, and I felt Rhys tense beside me. But before he could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Lies. The single word rang out, clear and strong. All eyes turned to the elderly female wolf who had stepped forward from among the northern delegation. Her face was deeply lined, her white hair braided with silver threads and tiny bones. Tattoos similar to the other northern wolves covered her exposed skin, telling stories I couldn't read. Elder Frida, Garrick acknowledged, his voice tight with suppressed anger. This is not your place to speak. If not mine, then whose? The old woman demanded, her gaze sweeping the hall. I am the last who remembers the truth. The last who survived Thorsten's purge with eyes to see and ears to hear. She turned to me, her gaze softening. Child of Lyra, do not heed Garrick's silver tongue. Your mother fled because Thorsten ordered her execution when she opposed the slaughter of those who sought peace with humans. When she escaped carrying you in her womb, he ordered every female wolf of childbearing age killed to ensure no rival bloodline survived. Gasps of horror rose from the assembled eastern wolves. Even in the most brutal pack conflicts, the slaughter of female wolves was considered taboo, an offense against the future of all wolfkind. Ancient history, Garrick snarled. The ravings of a wolf past her prime. Truth, Elder Frida countered, that many of us have been too cowed to speak. She addressed the northern wolves directly. How long will we live under the shadow of Thorsten's legacy? His son is cut from the same pelt, just craftier in hiding his cruelty. One of Garrick's warriors stepped forward, hand moving to his weapon, but Garrick stopped him with a sharp gesture. His face had gone cold with fury. Careful, old woman. Even your status won't protect you from charges of treason. Then charge me, she replied defiantly, and explain to the assembled packs why speaking truth is treasonous in the north. The standoff crackled with tension. I looked between them. Garrick with his barely contained rage, Elder Frida with her quiet dignity, and felt the weight of a choice I never expected to face. The last of the Moonshade line, caught between two worlds, neither fully mine. There is another way, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. All eyes turned to me, and I forced myself to stand taller. Blood need not be answered with more blood. Rhys watched me intently, neither supporting nor opposing whatever I might propose. This, I realized, was his gift to me. The space to find my own voice, to begin writing my own destiny. The northern and eastern packs have lived divided for generations, I continued, finding strength in the words as they came. My mother sought to bridge that divide and died for it. I won't let her sacrifice be in vain. I stepped forward, placing myself physically between Garrick and Elder Frida. As daughter of Lyra Moonshade and mate to the Eastern Alpha, I stand in both worlds. I claim no leadership, but I do claim my birthright as a voice for peace. Garrick's laugh was harsh. Pretty words from a girl who discovered her wolf mere hours ago. You know nothing of pack politics or the history you presume to heal. Then teach me, I challenged him. If the North truly welcomes me as you claim, prove it by sharing knowledge, not threats. Let representatives from northern territories join the Eastern Court as advisors and teachers. Let me learn the ways of both packs so I might truly serve as a bridge between them. The proposal was bold, perhaps naive, but it resonated with something deep inside me, the part that had always sought belonging. An interesting proposition, the shaman observed, stepping forward. One that honors ancient traditions of pack exchange during times of peace. Garrick's eyes narrowed, calculating. I could almost see the thoughts racing behind them. How to turn this to his advantage. How to appear reasonable without ceding ground. And if I refuse? He asked finally. If I claim the northern heir should return to her ancestral territories instead, then you reveal your true intentions, Rhys said quietly. Not to welcome Everly home, but to control the power her bloodline represents. A murmur of agreement ran through the watching wolves, eastern and northern alike. Garrick was trapped. To reject a reasonable offer of peaceful exchange would confirm the worst suspicions about his motives. After a tense moment, his face relaxed into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Of course we welcome cultural exchange. The North has much wisdom to share with our softer cousins. The insult was thinly veiled, but Rhys let it pass. Then we are agreed. Northern representatives will be welcome at the Eastern Court, to share in Everly's education, and to foster greater understanding between our packs. It wasn't a complete victory. I could see the calculation in Garrick's eyes. The plans already forming for how he might use this foothold to his advantage. But it was a beginning. A crack in the wall of hostility that had divided the territories for generations. Elder Frida caught my eye and gave me the slightest nod of approval. In that moment, I felt connected to something larger than myself. A legacy not just of blood, but of purpose. My mother had died seeking peace. Perhaps I could help achieve it. The shaman raised his hands, drawing attention back to the altar where the sacred waters still glowed with fading blue light. The mating ceremony draws to a close as the moon begins her descent. Let us complete the sacred rites before dawn breaks. The formal announcement effectively ended the confrontation, allowing both sides to withdraw without losing face. As the ceremony resumed, Garrick and his wolves were escorted to designated areas befitting their rank, carefully separated from Eastern nobles, but treated with appropriate respect. Rhys guided me back toward the dais, his hand warm against the small of my back. That was well done, he murmured. Your mother would be proud. The simple words touched something deep inside me. I'm not sure I handled it right, I confessed. I know nothing of diplomacy or pack politics. Yet, you found a middle path where others saw only conflict, he said. That instinct cannot be taught. As we took our places once more, I noticed Lady Valentina watching from across the hall, her expression calculating. Unlike Garrick, she had made no public scene, but I didn't doubt she was formulating her own response to the night's events, another challenge for another day. The ceremony continued until the first pale light of dawn began to filter through the high windows of the great hall. As tradition dictated, the newly formed mates departed one by one for private quarters, where they would complete their bonds, until only a handful of unpaired wolves remained. The shaman approached the dais one final time, bearing a small silver cup filled with the sacred waters. The alpha pair must complete the ritual before the waters lose their potency, he announced. My heart quickened. This was the moment when the spiritual connection revealed by the mating pull would be formally acknowledged before the packs. Rhys took my hand, leading me to stand before the shaman. Are you certain? He asked quietly. Once done, this cannot be undone. In his eyes, I saw not the Alpha King, but the man, offering me a choice, even now. I thought of all that had transpired since morning. The servant girl on her knees, the wolf awakened, the heir revealed. Each identity felt like a skin I was shedding, moving closer to some essential truth I was only beginning to understand. I'm certain, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. My wolf hummed with approval, recognizing her mate even if my human mind still struggled to comprehend all this meant. The shaman held out the cup. Drink together, as you will face all things to come, united in spirit and purpose. Rhys's hands closed over mine as we lifted the cup between us. The sacred waters tasted of moonlight and mountain springs, cool and ancient on my tongue. As we drank, the last of the blue light from the altar rose up, swirling around us in a glowing vortex that sealed the magic of our connection. For a heartbeat, I felt as if I could see through Rhys's eyes, feel his strength, his burden of leadership, his fierce protectiveness toward his pack. And I knew he glimpsed the same in me. My years of quiet observation from the shadows, my mother's last desperate act of love, the newly awakened power that flowed through my veins. When the light faded, something remained, a thread connecting us, humming with awareness. Not mind-reading as in children's tales, but a deeper knowing, a recognition that transcended words. It is done. The the shaman declared. Before the goddess and these witnesses, you are bound as mates, alpha and alpha mate of the Eastern Territories. A cheer rose from the Eastern Wolves, though I noticed both Garrick's contingent and Lady Valentina's supporters remained silent. Not everyone celebrated this union, but the goddess's choice could not be challenged without risking divine displeasure. As we turned to face the assembly, Rhys's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining. "The first step," he murmured. The first of many, I knew. Ahead lay challenges I could barely imagine. Learning to control my wolf, navigating pack politics, balancing the competing claims of North and East, and completing the mate bond in the most intimate sense. But for this moment, standing beside the man who had commanded me to rise from my knees, I felt equal to whatever might come. The mating ceremony concluded as dawn broke fully over the eastern mountains. Wolves dispersed to their quarters, some to sleep, others to celebrate privately. Garrick and his contingent withdrew to the guest wing, their presence a lingering shadow over what should have been a purely joyous occasion. Rhys led me from the great hall through corridors now quieting after the night's revelations. When we reached our chambers, he paused at the threshold. "The ceremonial bond is complete," he said, his voice low and intimate in the quiet corridor. "But the mating itself, that is for us alone. When we are both ready, relief and something like disappointment mingled in my chest. You would wait?" His hand came up to trace the curve of my cheek, the touch sending shivers across my skin. "You faced more in one night than most face in a lifetime, Everly. Discovering your wolf, your heritage, becoming my mate, I would not rush what should be savored." The consideration in his words touched me deeply. "Thank you," I said simply. His smile was warm as he opened the door, gesturing for me to enter first. "Rest now. Tomorrow, we begin building the future. Together." As I stepped across the threshold, I paused to look back at the corridor where I had scrubbed floors on my knees for so many years. The invisible girl was gone forever, transformed not just by magic or bloodline, but by the simple act of rising to her feet when commanded. I had entered the great hall as a servant and emerged as a wolf, a mate, a diplomat, a bridge between divided peoples. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them standing tall, never again on my knees unless it was my choice to kneel. The water had found its path through stone, just as my mother had promised, and I had found mine.